recently heard a direction from our abbess as a community that was such wise advice in terms of harmony. I think the direction came secondhand, but the message was, if someone asks you to do something, just do it. And the wisdom of that in terms of community harmony has really stayed with me, and it sort of became in concert with a teaching that I heard Venerable Gogwang give in the Varsa about the six harmonies and how harmony is created in the Sangha. So I've really been thinking about this particular aspect a lot. Just do it, and then also this topic of capacity and how that affects how we think about that and how we think about that in terms of community harmony. And of course, I'm talking to the Sangha here, but this is also family harmony, same principles. Workplace harmony, same principles. So I think it's useful in all kinds of situations. We often hear during our teachings about the six harmonies that the Buddha established or described that make a harmonious Sangha, and I'm not going to go into them in detail right now, but that the six harmonies arose out of his encounter with an example of a very harmonious Sangha, of Venerable Anuruddha and the two monks that he was living with. And the story goes that the Buddha had come from a very disharmonious Sangha, and then he came to the forest and found these three monks living really harmoniously together. And so he asked Anuruddha, as the example of a harmonious Sangha, what is it that makes you live together in harmony? And Venerable Anuruddha said, we deeply care for each other. We live in harmony like milk and water. And then he described how they did their day. So this was the time when the monastics were doing alms round, and they went out individually. They didn't go in a clump, it's for the benefit of the lay people, I assume, not to feed 4 people at a whack, but just one at a time, the monastics went out. And the way they worked it is that they would go out for alms round in the morning. The first one who came back then would set up the seat for eating, would draw the water for cleaning, to draw the water for drinking, would eat. If he had leftovers, he would leave them for the others in case there was something, they didn't get enough. Then he went on about his business. And the second person would come, have his meal, and then the third person would come. And that third person would then clean up, rearrange everything tidily, take care of the leftovers. I don't know, maybe he was the one who made the Preda offering. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, one by one, each monastic just did what needed to be done depending on what order their return to the living place was. So notice there was no rota. There was no rota about who was going to come back first today, who has to come back first tomorrow, who has to wash the dishes the next day. They simply did what needed to be done. And in that way, without a lot of conversation, without having a meeting, without having an assignment, they lived in harmony as a Sangha. So this thing about what Venerable Gogwang pointed out here, she said, this shows care and respect for one another. They knew it had to be done. They didn't argue about who had to do it or when they had to be done. They just did what was in front of them. And so that's one step further removed from do what someone asks you to do. But sometimes we need to be asked. We don't always see what needs to be done. But we can train to learn to actually just see it and do it. The other thing that came up, though, and I really saw this when we were all so sick. I mean, the people who were still standing carried everything. And I didn't hear any complaints. Maybe there were, but they didn't. Of course, I was deep in the writing studio and fast asleep, so I wouldn't have heard them. But I'm pretty sure what I saw is that they were doing it quite joyfully. And then as people began to feel better, as people began to get well, they moved into the kitchen or moved into the cleaning or moved into the whatever, that people really picked up and stepped up to do what could be done. And nobody said, should you, could you? You did or you didn't. There wasn't any question about that. And I thought that was a beautiful example, actually, of harmonious Sangha, living together and supporting one another. I was really happy and privileged to be a part of that. But it's so darn easy, because we know we've been in this situation too, where disharmony can come in when we start to look around and compare. I'm doing more work than you are. Why isn't that person doing this list? This is how long my list is. How come you added me to this other thing? I mean, I've heard it, I've said it. Let's just confess. We've all looked around and said, why are they doing that and I'm not doing that? Immediately when we start to compare who's doing what, how much work they're carrying, who has responsibility and who doesn't have responsibility, that kind of mind is what? Is run by a total affliction. This is not harmony, and it doesn't help with harmony. So when Venerable Guoguang said something that just, like, I just went, whoa, she said, everybody serves the community according to their capacity. Everyone serves the community according to their capacity. At any given time, that's my addition. At any given time. So she said, if you have more physical health or more abilities, then you have more merit. Therefore, don't waste that merit by crabbing about what you have to do. Generate more and benefit the people around you. Don't destroy it. And this thing about capacity is also not fixed. It's like this was very interesting for me. So on Sunday, I had great energy, just this past, great energy. I was feeling great. Monday, I tanked. So what I thought I could do on Monday, on Sunday, didn't turn out to be accurate, right? So some days we have capacity to do things, some days we don't. But, so there's a couple of things around that capacity thing that, we have physical capacity, we have mental capacity, we may have skill capacity. One of the things that we've, I think, all observed is the more we learn to manage our minds, the greater our capacity is for work and for caring for one another and actually being able to hear each other. So capacity, different kinds of capacities grow in different ways. But it's not, as I said, it's not a fixed thing. There was a time when someone said, okay, I need all the strong backs to show up and do this job. I was right there. Now my back is actually still in pretty good shape, but I don't think it's strong. And I don't think anymore I should be showing up for those things. I think the injury that is very likely to follow, just because we have to acknowledge that sickness, old age, and death are like getting closer and closer. So I'm so grateful that there are people who have the capacity, who do show up. And again, seem to enjoy it beautifully. I don't hear a lot of complaints. And it's also okay for me that I no longer have that capacity. I'm not stressing about the fact that I'm not out there throwing the logs down the chute, although I love doing it. Let's just admit, it's really beautiful. So capacity goes both ways. If we're in a living, this is my theory, if we're living in a community where we trust one another that we are all giving to our capacity at any given time, then I neither have to have the affliction that's jealous or irritated that people are taking a break when I really want one, but don't take it, by the way. Nor do I have to feel like ashamed, like I'm no longer capable of doing what I used to be able to do, and am I still have a worthy place in the community? We can go back and forth with this. The other thing I was thinking about capacity, this is a little bit random, but so the same thing that happened on Sunday, Venerable Sangye Kadro was not well and asked if I would be willing or able to do the talk on Monday night in Newport, and I said, sure, no problem. I had good energy on Sunday. Monday, I did not. And, well, actually, even when she asked that question, I thought I was in a slide, but I did an internal roll call. Okay, who else could do it? Tarpon, no. Semke, no. Chigme, no. Venerable Samten, no. Venerable Namcho, no. Venerable Sepul, no. They're either sick or totally overwhelmed. And that's where I stopped the roll call. And I said, okay, I'll do it. Now, there are other people with capacity to do that. And my little narrow mind, sort of stuck in the past, didn't make a roll call any further. So the kindness of Venerable Children, who pointed out there were younger people who could actually do the job, Venerable Deki and Venerable Moonloom, who are not here today because they're giving a talk, went and gave their talk. So there's also a piece about this capacity of learning to recognize with each other that it grows, that it's not limited. And also learning to recognize with ourselves that our capacity grows and doesn't have to be limited. And then also the very difficult task of learning to recognize within ourselves when the capacity isn't there. Now, I am accused often of pushing. It's a unjust accusation. So, and sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're not. And part of my growing capacity is I have actually beginning to accept the fact that it's not an accusation. It might be a kind observation. And that then I'm the one who has to assess for myself, is it accurate in this moment or is it not? Because sometimes it is, but not always. Not always. So it doesn't have to be, I don't have to take it on as like a judgment or criticism. It is, or an accusation. But the responsibility is for me to actually assess and then accept that as a kindness, as a kind observation for me to check, is this true or not true? And I'll admit, often it is, but not always. So just think about this as a capacity thing. I mean, I'm really playing with it. I don't have any conclusions, and there is no conclusion. But to think that each one of us is operating to our capacity, giving fully, and having trust and confidence in that. And if we check our minds and say, you know, today I'm really not, well, let's think about it. Why am I not? You know, what's the obstacle here? What is the need I have that's making me not want to operate to my capacity? So that's worth exploring too. But if we hold each other in that trust as a community, like we did when we were all sick, right? When you're too sick to have major afflictions, that's probably helpful. But now that we're getting way better, and our minds are, right? To just think about this capacity thing and accept and honor each person's different capacities and different abilities and how each person who lives here gives so much, and appreciate that kindness. And that just contributes to the wonderful foundation we already have of living in a harmonious community. So, like when the vacuum cleaner filter is dirty, just clean it. We don't need a rota.